Hello, everybody, and welcome to Starting Small Music. I'm Justin McCormick, and you're about to hear a conversation with an artist, musician, and music industry professional on their journey and how they got to where they are today. At Starting Small, we like to take you on a journey uncovering the untold stories of your favorite songs and artists. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Just keep a smile on your face and it'll be okay. Try not to be bitter, you gotta do it either way. Keep a smile on your face and it'll be okay. So when life throws a jab, you gotta duck out of the way.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Starting Small Music Podcast. Today we have Zach Rickard with us. How you doing today, Zach?
Doing great, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. So getting right into your story, where did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
So I grew up kind of in the middle of nowhere. I'm in a little town in eastern Wyoming called Laramie, Wyoming. So just kind of the middle of nowhere, not much going on. But my dad did own a music store.
Oh, cool.
As well as my whole family's pretty musical. So my mother was a piano professor at the University of Wyoming.
Oh, very cool.
Dad was a band director, turned into a music store owner. So music was just kind of all around, but it was always like classical music for the most part.
Gotcha.
But because my dad owned a music store, I was around guitars starting when I was like 10 or 12, and it just grabbed me, pretty quickly. Once especially as a kid, like I would get into like rock and metal and like listen to dudes just lay down riffs, and I was just like, I have to do that, and just got obsessed with guitars. So I started buying them. And then because I was just in a music store, I started, tweaking truss rods and doing stuff far younger than I ever should have, for sure. But, my dad was there to help me, and he'd been doing it for a while. So I just started working on guitars as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of, fell in love with it and always did that, and then played guitar as well. And then about the time I was 17, I moved out and discovered that paying bills is harder than I thought. So I started playing in country bands because I was like, man, that's where the money's at,
Mm-hmm.
Well, in Wyoming, obviously. And then next thing I knew, I actually fell in love with the music as well. But so then I just started playing with country bands all the time. This is out in Wyoming still.
Mm-hmm.
So I was playing and then working on guitars throughout the week and doing that, and then trying to figure out how to get into the industry because, I always wanted to tour, wanted to do that. I tried college for a little bit. Really didn't enjoy it and couldn't find, I'd go through that list of majors and be like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Absolutely not. And I was like, I just want to tour. There's no like degree for that, Didn't even realize Belmont was a thing at the time. But then, so kept trying to do that and was trying to figure out where to move, and then continued just working on guitars. So then on the weekends, I would drive down to Denver and work with different luthiers down there, dudes that knew like, full on acoustic rebuilds, things like that. So I'd work with them. That way I could get better and better at doing that. I worked with a dude, he helped me build an acoustic. So I was just basically spending as much time as I could just getting my hands on guitars, learning how to do, more and more things, vintage restoration, kind of more detailed things. And then at some point when I was just trying to figure out how to get there, I remember a dude was just like, man, really a lot of the music industry is just being at the right place at the right time. I'm like, well, that's cool. I don't really know how to make that happen, Thanks for the advice. And then at some point I was like, well, if I just go to the right place, all I have to do is wait for the right time, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like, well, I guess in Nashville, it's pretty much always the right place.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just like, well, shoot, I should do that. So at that point, I had known one luthier that in Denver that I worked with had also worked at Gruen and Gibson back in the day before he moved. So I talked with him, and he was graciously put me in contact with a few of those guys. Came and visited Nashville, interviewed with Gruen and Gibson and a few other people. And at the end of that weekend, Gibson Custom at the time was doing most of their the relicing and aging for like the Tom Murphy stuff. They were doing that out of house, just because it's kind of a harder thing to teach for like a factory worker or whatever. So they had contracted that out. And by the end of the weekend, they basically told me, if you move to Nashville, we might be able to give you work.
We might be able to.
And at 20 years old, I was like, done. I don't need anything more. So I packed up everything I owned, found a room in a house on Facebook with total strangers, and came out. And thankfully, I was able to find work doing that Gibson thing. So I did that for about probably 2.5, 3 years. Basically, I would come in and out of Gibson once a week. They would give me some Les Pauls, and then I would copy different old guitars and age them and make them look like certain models or whatnot and do that. And then just started networking as much as I could, meeting anybody and everybody, go to every show, kind of the standard Nashville thing there. And so then I would start at the time, I was like, I still want to play too. So I would just play with anybody and everybody I could. No one, huge or anything, just random dudes on Broadway, whatever I could do. So play guitar. And then as I was doing that, what ended up happening was, I'd play with people and tell them what my day job was. And they would be like, oh, do you work on guitars too? And I'm like, yeah, of course, sure. And they'd be like, I have a guitar that you should work on, like, if you can. And so I just started being like, yeah, of course, and then so next thing I knew, I was slowly getting a lot of people that would just call me and be like, can you work on my guitar for me? And I was like, yeah, of course. So I'm doing that kind of on the side, just out of my house. But the end goal was always, I just wanted to be on the road. I had to, I mean, once it gets you, it gets you. So I was trying to figure that out. But then, I mean, the issue is always, at this point, I am 23 years old. And really, I mean, the only artists that can afford a guitar tech are kind of more well-established artists.
Right.
But for the most part, they always want someone who's also well-established in the touring industry, which I was not. I'd never even set foot on a bus.
Yeah.
So I ended up slowly getting my name thrown in for these gigs, places where I probably shouldn't have been thrown in, but I was, and every time I would interview, they'd be like, man, you seem cool, your stuff, you've never even been on a bus, so we're gonna pick this other dude because he knows what he's doing. And I get that, absolutely, so I was just like, well, okay. So continued just doing the thing in town, was getting frustrated just because I was like, I don't know how to get the touring experience without getting a touring job,
Right.
So I was trying to do that, and then ended up taking another job at a guitar company called Novo Guitars, kind of like a boutique company here in town. Was working for them for a while, and then in the wildest way that all Nashville things work, a buddy of mine called me and he was like, hey man, do you still want a tech? And I was like, yeah, they're not going to say yes, but sure. And he was like, okay, I threw your name in for Brothers Osborne. They really need a tech like last minute. I was like, great, love those dudes, send it over, And so basically it turns out what had happened was they had another tech, and at the time they were starting a direct support slot under Dierks Bentley, so it was larger crowds than usual, and they were just having to really have a good show, have everything nailed. And the Brothers, it tends to be a very guitar heavy show as well, so they kind of needed some sort of emphasis on that. And so they had another dude. He wasn't doing great, and it's midsummer, so everyone is already hired and on the road, so they were a little desperate, which desperation played in, and it was perfect.
Right place, right time.
Exactly, yes. So basically this dude, it was the most random. So John, one of the brothers, is married to another artist, Lucy Silvis. So John told Lucy he needed a tech. Lucy told her band. Her drummer then texted this other guy, a guy named Dane Kinzer, who plays with Kane Brown now, texts him and says, do you know any good guitar techs? Dane then vouches for me to Danny, who I've never met. Danny then vouches for me to Lucy and John. John throws my name in and says, all right, call this guy. So never having met anyone in this world at all, the tour manager and production manager called me and said, can you sit down like tomorrow? And I was like, yeah, sure, of course. So I took my lunch break at Novo and went and took another job interview. Sat with them, we chatted for a while, and same thing where I was just like, look, man, I'm gonna be honest, I've never toured in my life, but I assure you I'm gonna work harder than the other dudes, and I'm gonna learn faster, so that's not gonna be an issue for you.
Yeah,
you you let me at it and I will go, and he was like, yeah, okay, fine, so then they called me the next morning. They were like, yeah, man, if you can start Friday, we're going, and clear your schedule for the next 6 months.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. So then, yeah, so my first time I'd ever set foot on a tour bus was my first day of work with the Bros. Never met them before. I met them about 30 minutes before their set. And we opened for Eric Church in Ohio. It was like 24,000 people, which is more than my hometown's population. And that was my first day at work.
Wow.
And I remember just being like, what am I doing? This is insane. Yeah. And so at that point, it was just like, I would take notes every single day. Like I was carrying around a notepad, writing everything I could down. Every other guitar tech on the stage, I would just like go talk to him and be like, how do you do this? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Any advice, help me. I'm brand new. Yeah. And somehow I've now been with the Bros going on. This will be my 5th year with them. And somehow they still haven't fired me. So here we are.
Now,
yeah.
I want to pick back up in this part of the conversation here in a minute. But so growing up, you mentioned some classical music, some rock music. What are some artists or albums that stick out to you that kind of you remind pulling you into music, wanting you to just kind of dive in?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely got into the shred guys early. My dad was also a guitar player, so he would, give me like Jeff Beck. I remember he gave me Jeff Beck's Blow by Blow.
R.I.P. recently.
I know, absolutely. He gave me Steve Vai, Passion and Warfare, Joe Satriani. I can't remember exactly which album, but I would just listen to those over and over. And, at the time I couldn't even play guitar. I was like, 10 or 12. So I'm just sitting there air guitaring along with them, whatever. Got huge into those. Bunch of metal band. I eventually switched, I loved all sorts of metal bands. Like there's a band called Lamb of God. Tons of great riffs, and I would just sit there and learn those over and over and play them as wrong as possible, but just so excited that I could play anything. I'd do a lot of that. Yeah, and then eventually that switched into country just because in Wyoming, that's all that's there, So yeah, just playing the random bars. I remember I played with this band called Alice and Dry. It was pretty much like myself and a bunch of like 60-year-old dudes because that's just what the scene was.
Yeah.
And I remember the steel player would always say, if Merle ain't done it, I ain't doing it, So it was very traditional old country and nothing else. But that was a great way to cut my teeth because I felt like that was actually a weird, cool step straight from rock into like, like a Dwight Yoakam kind of like Bakersfield thing.
For
and
sure.
It actually made sense to me really quickly. Yeah.
It's cool you mentioned the steel. So that's actually kind of what got me into music. My grandpa's played steel his whole life. And I mean, as a fellow musician, it's just crazy seeing just even though I'm related to him, seeing someone rip on the steel, I'm just like, there's so much going on here,
Yeah.
Level, everything. So as a guitar tech, what's your outlook on the steel? And I mean, is it probably one of the hardest instruments to learn in your opinion?
That 1,000,000%. It's so funny you say that. I literally, so we have about 3 months off right now, just trying to, go through a record cycle and all that jazz. And I actually called our steel player because he has about 4 of them. And I was like, I want to learn. Can I borrow one? So I actually have one in my house right now. I was playing it just last night. It's impossible. It's so hard. Yeah.
They are single or double neck?
This one's just a single. It's, three bottom pedals, 4 up. Yeah, it's wildly complicated. So and then also because we tour with one, I wanted to kind of slowly learn how to actually work on it and go on the insides. But yeah, anyone who plays steel well, I respect them more than anything. That's for sure.
Are you learning using Jimmy Day tuning or Buddy Emmons?
Just a Nashville E9 tuning.
I got you. Very cool. So when you first meet the brothers, do you remember any specific conversations with them, kind of just getting to know them? Any funny moments, right, when you first
absolutely. Yeah. We definitely, the first time I ever met them right before the show is kind of funny because they had no idea who I was. They don't know what I know or what I don't know. So it was to the point where they were like, yeah, man, so for Ain't My Fault, I'm gonna need the red guitar. It's like, I mean, you can call it a 335, but like, I swear, I know some things, I promise, but they never knew, when I had started, like, what do you need me to do that the other dude didn't? And they were like, put a capo on the right fret. I don't know, plug it in. It's like, okay, I can handle that. Yeah. So, and the first thing that I really bonded with them over is I'm a huge vintage guitar nut. Loved them since I was a kid. And then especially like working at Gibson, that's all I would do is replicate old guitars, and I love them. And the brothers are very much, obsessed with vintage guitars in the same way that I am. So I was within a few weeks, it was every time John and I would talk, it was just like, look at this reverb listing of this dumb guitar, that is so cool, and that's all we would talk about for a long time, was just vintage guitars. And yeah, that was definitely great. Yeah, went through some growing pains, as we all do, and I think my third week in, I accidentally broke a Les Paul, and which was not the greatest day. But yeah, I remember I had to go talk to John, and I'm like, hey, your Les Paul is broken into half. And he just started laughing and was like, yeah, that one was a loner anyway. I don't even care. Because I remember I'm sitting there like, I'm fired. This is it. The game is over. They'll still make fun for it. But yeah, really good dudes. I'm very blessed to be out with those guys for sure.
Do you have a favorite tour that you guys have been a part of, either headlining or on an opening slot?
Man, I mean, we've been lucky to do so much. They kind of slip in and out of the commercial country into like kind of the Americana scene. Probably my absolute favorite though, we did the Willie Nelson's Outlaw tour. And yeah, I mean already. But so we were the first band that played that day. And then it went Alison Krauss, Bonnie Raitt, and Willie Nelson.
Insane lineup.
Yeah, it was like I would pack the truck as fast as humanly possible and then just go sit in front of house and just soak in that whole show. Like that was, yeah, that's a tour I would absolutely relive that one anytime. Yeah, that was really great.
It's cool you bring that up too, because I saw on your Instagram you actually had a picture where you're holding Willie Nelson's Trigger guitar.
Yeah.
What's it feel to just like, do you remember just holding like history in your hand, just like trying to soak that in? Like, what was that like?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So that was the first show we ever played with Willie. Was this weird? It was a Strawberry Festival down in Florida. And it was kind of like a dual headlining sort of thing where Willie Nelson headlined at 3 p.m. kind of for the Blue Hairs. And then at like 9 p.m. we headlined. So it's very strange. But because of that, we loaded in first. And the whole day I was just like, I really want to butter this guy up. Like, I really want to touch Trigger. I want to learn about it, everything. So like, as we're setting up, I set my stuff up as far back as I possibly could. Left the prime spot for Tom, who's Willie's tech. Left everything good. I pulled power for him. So when he came in, I was like, here's this. I have this already ready for you. He was like, man, thank you. So I'm just buttering him up. And he turns out he's one of the nicest humans. But yeah, and then I just spent the whole day just asking him questions, learning, because that's a big thing of any of this, is just talk to dudes, ask them their stories, learn how to do it. I'm sure you've learned this as much as anybody. Yeah. And then eventually when he pulled out Trigger, I was just like, I felt like we'd sort of built enough of a rapport that I could like look at the guitar and ask him a little more, so that I'm asking him questions about like how they maintained it, what they did with like the frets, as nerdy as you can get. He pulls out the guitar and I'm asking about the frets. But yeah, and so as he's doing that, I was like, can I touch it? And he was like, yeah, man, of course,
That's
so I got to
crazy.
I played like the first couple bars of Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, and it was just like, that's it. That's the sound. It was, yeah, one of the coolest moments of my life for sure.
That's so dope. Now,
Yeah.
working in the guitar sector of the country music industry, who do you think's honestly at their top of the game right now? I mean, whether that be an artist like Brad or Keith or a touring guy playing guitar on the road, who do you think's the best guitarist in country right now?
Oh man, I don't know. They're all great. Nobody gets there accidentally, for sure. All of these dudes out here are just amazing. Obviously, I mean, the bros are great, Keith Urban, Brad, all of those dudes are great. I mean, a lot of these guys have just absolute ringers in their band. I mean, I think you interviewed Tyler from Morgan Wallen. Like, that dude is one of the scariest players in Nashville. He's unreal,
Yeah.
I mean, Brooks and Dunn, they have Jeff King out with them. He's, recorded 1 million records. He's just unreal. I mean, yeah, I could never pick a favorite. There's so many good dudes, and a lot of them, come from different genres and bring in different styles. And I think that's what makes a lot of these artists so special, is that they're actually stealing kind of tips and tricks from all these other worlds that the guitar players have grown up in. But yeah, I don't think I could ever pick a favorite, man. There's so I mean, it's every time you listen to somebody play, you could pick something else new up from them for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
Now, just to
Yeah.
pick your brain too, as someone that works on guitars, I thought it was so cool when I saw Marty Stewart. He had a G bender in his acoustic. I have
Yeah.
to think that that's a pretty hard process to be able to build that in, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And Marty has always been a big proponent of benders. Thankful. With the brothers, we tour with a couple of B benders.
Mhm.
Love them, and that's so yeah, Marty gets that. It's all based off of, I mean, a drummer designed all of that. That was Gene Parsons and Clarence that did that way back in the day. Which, like, have you seen the telly that Marty has that also has, the original
Yeah,
bender in it? Yeah, like that stuff is to me is just so fascinating and I love it. Yeah. Yeah, Marty is an incredible player. Yeah, but that's yeah, especially like, putting it in an acoustic is one thing, and then being able to maintain it for sure is another thing, and kudos to the guys that travel with him, keeping all that stuff together as well.
for sure. Now, kind of going back a little bit too, when you first moved to Nashville, you talked about networking. What would like any tips you have be that something you picked up and being young in town, just kind of trying to meet
Yeah,
new people?
yeah, man. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there because I think every single one of us that have moved to town, done this and gotten through it, we have all had to be that dude that says, "Hi, I don't know anybody. Can you help me?"
Mhm.
And so at this point, like, just reach out to people because they had somebody help them when they started. And so a lot of us are more than willing to do the same thing. If someone calls me tomorrow and says, "Hey, I just moved to town, help me," I'd say, "Cool, let's go get a beer right now. I'll teach, I don't, we're all making it up, but I'll give you anything I can."
Yeah,
Yeah. Same, message, I would just message random people on Instagram that I was like, "Hey, it looks like you're doing well. You're doing what you're doing. Is there a chance I could buy you dinner at some point?" Anything. Meet people. I think one of the biggest things that I would say is um try to meet people with intentionality, and because like really this whole business, it's all relationships.
yeah,
It's all who you know, how you know them, whatever. And so it's, I would say, just try and be friends with people first. Don't meet people and be like, "Hi, I'm new to town. I know you do things. What kind of jobs can you get me?" If you go into it like that, they're immediately gonna be like, "Okay, I don't want to hit." But if you
right.
just be people's friends, be present, then at the time when they do need to send somebody a phone number for something, then so that's, I think that's the biggest thing, is just actually be friends with all the people out here, create real relationships, because that's when you'll actually get past work, is because no one's going to refer the guy that they only met once and they don't know anything about it. But if you're the dude that hangs out with them, talks to them about real life things, and you're good at your job,
Mhm.
that's when you'll actually have luck. I think
For
being
sure.
very intentional about just being a good human helps. I mean, it goes a long ways.
Yeah. Now, I like to close my interviews by asking what a piece of advice is that you've learned along your journey. I know you just touched on a bunch of points there. Is there anything else
Yeah,
that you feel like you'd give advice to your younger self or someone that just moved to town? Anything else other than the networking?
absolutely. Yeah. Man, I mean, the networking is big, but I think just working hard, and not being knowing that it's going to take a long time no matter what,
Mhm.
and being willing to be poor and work, be willing to be that guy that worked a bartending shift till 3 a.m. and then woke up at 6 to get back into it and do that thing,
Yeah,
and just be willing to just work so hard that, and be present. I think if you're not in the room, you're not going to get that call if you're not around. So it's, don't wait for somebody else to just randomly call you out of nowhere and be like, "Hey, do you want a job?" Like, you got to get in there, get present, be working your ass off, and at some point they'll be like, "Oh, you're the guy."
yeah,
So I think, yeah, just be intentional, work hard, never take it for granted either. I know a lot of us have gotten to a point where you get to do really cool things, and never let that stop being special for sure, because it's still incredible every time, you know.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment, and check out my music on all streaming platforms at Justin McCormick. See you guys next time.